Good day, everyone. This is retired Fire Chief Paul Smith with Marin Fire History. And today we have another exciting episode of Fire Facts. Our guest today is the Executive Officer of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, Mark Brown. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Great, Paul. Great to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking we'd chat a little bit about today is the history of wildfire prevention and how agencies practice wildfire mitigation with regard to vegetation management back in the day. And then we'll bring it forward and we'll talk about what your relatively new agency here in Marin County is accomplishing and maybe some of the goals that your agency set. I know back in the 80s, as individual fire agencies, we all tried to enforce the State Code 4291 the best we could. And it was hit or miss. Sometimes we had really good successes and sometimes not so much. And at the end of the day, the vegetation always grows back. So can you talk a little bit about, what your agency is and how you're working to mitigate the vegetation threat to the homes and businesses in the county?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it really makes me think about when I started at Marin County Fire in 1991. And I do think that we need to break up this conversation into vegetation management off of private property and then vegetation management in and around our homes and on private property. As you know, there was late 80s, early 90s, a strong effort to have prescribed fire and other vegetation management practices in and around our public lands. Jim Selfridge was the spearhead of that. And he had many large projects that he had implemented and had more projects slated to be implemented. But environmental concerns about smoke management, fear of prescribed fire being escaping and causing more damage.
Yeah, Mark, last year we did a interview with retired Deputy Chief from Marin County Fire, Jim Selfridge, and we have this piece here when he describes vegetation management back in the 70s and the 1980s.
In 1981, CDF developed what was called at that time, the Chaparral Management Program that was later changed to the VMP, Vegetation Management Program, where they provided funding, program EIR, insurance, and equipment to do prescribed fire. And equipment, I mean helicopters with helitorches. From 1984 to 2021, we would have accomplished an enormous amount. We would have reduced the fuel loading in the high hazard areas in this county tremendously, but unfortunately that never happened. Finally, you're hearing little bits and pieces of people talking about prescribed fire again, but it's 30 years after the fact. So
really put a big stop on our prescribed fire and our vegetation management practices that Jim was so successful with in the 80s and 90s. And that's really led to the forest health issue that we have in Marin now. Our forests are not healthy. Our forests are not the way they are supposed to be. If you compare pictures from the 20s to the way things look now, it's completely different. Our forests are overpopulated with trees. They're competing with each other and making unhealthy trees. One can make the argument that sudden oak death is attributed to that overpopulation of trees and the lack of forest health. And so we really do need to work with our public land managers to bring about that improved forest health. Prescribed fire is one of the options. Mechanical removal is another option. But before I really dig into that too much, the other piece is what people are doing on their private property and what they're doing in and around their homes. Yeah. And Public Resource Code section 4291 that you referred to is the state law for properties that are in the state responsibility area. of which about 200,000 acres in Marin is in the SRA. But the vast majority of the homes are not in the SRA. So Marin County Fire, I remember my first spring in 1991, I went out and I was doing what we called 4291 inspections. And we'd walk around with our form and we'd tell people what they needed to do around their home. Like you said, with varying success. Some people took it seriously. Some people did not. And we really had no teeth behind making sure that these practices were implemented.
Sure.
And it quite frankly, it wasn't a holistic approach. And that's one of the things the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is trying to create, is a holistic approach. And we're calling it our house out approach. Let's start at the house. Let's get our residents educated and aware of the home hardening that they need to do. Because that's what we're finding out, is that if we can keep the homes from igniting, then we've solved our biggest problem, because the homes are creating the embers that are catching other homes on fire. So if we can keep that first line of homes from catching on fire, then it keeps the other homes downwind from catching on fire. And we're finding out it has less to do with the vegetation around the home as it does with the siding on the home, the vents in the eaves, the type of roof, the hardscaping, zero vegetation or 0 to 5 feet from the home. So we're really working hard to educate our residents, give them the tools and resources they need to harden their homes, and then helping them create fire smart landscaping. And so that if an ember lands in their yard, it's not going to catch anything on fire. If it does, it'll just stay to that isolated little patch in their yard, right?
Sure.
And statewide, the question is how do we enforce this? Some areas of the county are citing people and they're fining people for not doing this work. And what is being found out statewide is that approach isn't working. And part of the reason is, let's say you have $10,000 worth of work that we're recommending and you get a $300 fine and you're not motivated to do the work, you're likely just to pay the $300 fine rather than do the work. So we are really trying to use the public education approach, and also the approach that the strength of our communities is some of its parts. So if everybody does their part, our entire community will be safe. We're also trying to incentivize that work through grants and other programs that so people who don't have the financial resources to do all the work can do the work. We also have to consider a systems approach, and there's no one silver bullet to solve this problem. So we're asking our homeowners to take action on home hardening and defensible space. And then the MWPA and each of our local member agencies are working hard on improving our evacuation routes.
Sure.
So that when people evacuate, when they are on an evacuation route, they will be safe on that road. Because quite frankly, it'll be impossible to avoid traffic jams during evacuation, right?
And we saw that time and time again in California. San Diego, we've seen that out up in the Santa Rosa area, and of course Paradise when they had the Paradise fire several years ago. So yeah, if you keep the people safe, then you don't have to evacuate.
Right. And so if we do want them to evacuate, however, when they are on that evacuation route, we want them to be safe in their car. And so the work that we are doing along the evacuation routes decreases the fire intensity so that they can survive on their car while they're on that road. The next component is to demonstrate and talk about what we're calling the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. And that's creating a shaded fuel break along the wildland urban interface boundary around the entire Ross Valley. And it'll be between 200 and 300 feet wide, depending on the vegetation and the terrain. And it's not clear cutting. It's going to be keeping the trees, the healthy trees will be in there. We're just going to be thinning out the dead trees, and we're going to be taking out the dead and down. And the whole idea is that as embers start landing from an approaching fire in the shaded fuel break, it really doesn't have anything to ignite or to generate more extreme fire. And then that'll decrease the ember generation that's closer to our communities. Right. And then as the fire front hits that shaded fuel break, intensities go down. We slow the rate of spread. We make it a more tenable environment for our residents. And if everyone's done their D-space and we've done our evacuation route clearing, we get everybody out safely. And then we give the firefighters a chance to go in there and save structures.
Sure. Now, we had some success with shaded fuel breaks in the Ross Valley area before. I know I did several when I was fire chief in Kenfield. And for the folks that haven't been educated on shaded fuel breaks yet, they look great. My best analogy is it's like a park-like setting when the shaded fuel break is done. You go from a tangled mess of vegetation on the side of the hillside or along a path to a very, very nice, clean, properly managed vegetation.
It really is nice. I mean, instead of looking at this wall of bramble and bushes intermixed with these trees, you actually can see through the trees. You can see the open space. And we also have some success stories from this last fire season. Small fire on San Rafael Hill hit an MWPA funded shaded fuel break project. Mm-hmm. And the fire intensities went down dramatically, turned into a creeping fire in the understory. And it ended up being a healthy fire for that area.
Sure.
And what was great, too, is that the residents knew that project had occurred, and they had confidence that fire was not going to escape containment, and everyone stayed calm. Sure. And calm people just make better decisions.
Sure.
So we're really excited about getting traction on that. We look to have other projects like the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break throughout the entire county. And then we are also working with our land management partners for the larger forest health projects.
You mentioned that as we started, Mark. You mentioned there are really two components. There's folks like you and I that own a home and we have a yard. We need to take care of our yard and do a proper pruning and maintain our defensible space. The other huge component are the public landowners. If in Marin County, it's the federal government, some state lands, and of course, our water district and our open space district. And, they realize, I think, that they've got a responsibility too, correct? And how are you working with those land managers are you going to do shaded fuel breaks? Are they responsible to maintain their land? Are they going to put more resources into it? Or what's their big picture, Mark?
There is a lot of momentum right now with all of our public land management agencies in increasing their funding for forest health, mm-hmm. which is in reality wildfire prevention as well. The healthier we make the forest, the less intense any fires will be in the forest. The federal government now is releasing billions, literally billions of dollars towards forest health. So the National Park Service for the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and the Point Reyes National Seashore is on tap to get their portion of those billions. And so we've been working with them. For us, our initial partnership with our land management agencies are right up against the wildland urban interface boundary, mm-hmm. because we want to protect where the assets are first, that from our motivation. But the land management agencies are also looking at the bigger picture as well, and are digging deeper into their wildlands and have numerous forest health projects underway. State Parks has influx of funding, and they're starting to increase their work, as is Marin Municipal Water District just produced a programmatic environmental impact report that is allowing them to get much more work done. And then Measure A funding now will, if Measure A passes, it will have $2 million a year dedicated to wildfire prevention on their lands.
On the public land.
On the public lands.
Okay.
And we will enter into a contract with them if it's approved as part of the ordinance language that we go into a contract with them, mm-hmm. to partner on how we do these projects on Marin County parks and open space land. The group One TAM, which is a conglomerate of all the public land management agencies, right. They partnered on a vegetation map of the entire county, and so they know the health of all our forests and all our lands in the county, and they're using that to guide their work, and they're prioritizing based on this map, and they can hit the most critical areas first, and then once those are accomplished, they can start going to other areas.
So basically, the public land managers, if you will, the Mount Tam group, they've got really two objectives then, because it is a watershed. They have to protect the watershed, because if the watershed burns, our water quality is going to go very, very quickly, go poorly very, very quickly. And the second, of course, is the forest health.
Absolutely. And if forest health, good watershed management, and fire prevention all go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand.
And how about this? Our overgrown forests need to water. And so those overgrown forests are sucking more water out of the ground. Therefore, less water is going into the reservoirs. So if we create that healthier forests that aren't overcrowded, then we actually get more groundwater, and then therefore we get more water in our reservoirs.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. And so it brings us back to, I think the term we're using now is fire adapted communities. So where would you say on the scale is, how are we doing? You've only been doing this a short period of time with the Marin Wildfire Authority, but it seems like the goal is to get our communities working together, our neighborhoods working together, and aim towards fire adaptation, because we know fire prevention is a great mantra, but when the fire starts, you have to have a fire hardened community, because the fire prevention piece is now a fire suppression piece.
Exactly. And you hit it, you said it perfectly. Fire is an inevitable piece of our environment. In fact, our environment needs fire to stay healthy. And so rather than trying to eliminate all fire, we need to just accept that fire is a natural aspect of our environment and be able to coexist with fire, so that when a fire does burn, it burns with low intensities. It does not kill people. It doesn't take any homes out. And in fact, it helps make our environment healthier.
Sure.
So all of our work is geared towards creating a fire adapted environment. How have we progressed? Well, I think we've progressed in the public education portion of it the greatest. And we are getting a lot of people accepting and understanding the fire adaptation. Mm-hmm. We performed 35,000 defensible space inspections last year throughout the county. And our compliance rate is remarkably low, and compared to other areas of the state. I think part of that is, I think our standards that we're evaluating to are higher than other areas in the state. We have 54 evaluators that are going out that are dedicated to these evaluations.
Okay.
Also, when you and I were doing these inspections, Paul, a long time ago, that was only in the SRA. And so the state responsibility lands. So there's hundreds of thousands of homes, or tens of thousands of homes in Marin that have never been evaluated before in their lives. So these inspections are occurring on these properties for the first time. Mm-hmm. So of course, there's going to be a lot of work to get done. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to see traction with our defensible space program and how much work that's getting done. I see an increase in the number of grants that we've been approving to get the work done on these properties. And then our public agencies, our fire agencies that have been doing evacuation route clearing, we have cleared hundreds of miles of evacuation routes over the last year. So we're getting closer, but we have a long road ahead of us.
You do. Backing up a little bit, you mentioned ember spread and how we've come since the 1990s. Well, I recall after the Oakland Hills fire, 91, I believe that was, Marin County adopted an ordinance to not eliminate, but not approve any more wood shake roofs, untreated wood shake roofs. And that was huge, because you have to remember in the 90s, all these homes we're talking about in and out of the SRA that were built in the 50s had cedar shake roofs or cedar or shake roofs.
Right.
And they found out in the 1990s that, hey, these are a bad thing, because these embers will go flying through the air. So, from my perspective, you take a look at how we started with the baby steps in eliminating eliminating wood roofs and going to fire safe roofing, all the way today, where there are actual building products such as siding, vents that will tempered windows that will help keep the fire out of your home. And we never had that back 20, 30 years ago.
And Marin County was one of the first counties to enact the Class A roof ordinance. And so we've been a leaders for that for a long time. And then I think our next target really needs, my personal opinion, our next target needs to be the attic vents. Go to the smaller attic vents, the ember resistant vents, or blocking the eaves so that the embers can't even get to the vents.
Sure.
Eliminate shake siding, go into hardy board type siding or stucco siding, and then the subfloor vents are another avenue. And then you mentioned the windows. Going to dual glazed windows is a huge step forward. So those are all the components that we're trying to educate the community on during our home evaluations. And we literally walk around with our residents and point these things out, and they get a very visual report that shows pictures. They get a picture of their map of their property line with their house on it. And then where we find each of the findings, the picture literally shows up on that report in that spot. So we're giving the residents tremendous amount of information to do what's best around their homes.
You know, I'm glad you're doing this. I look back at, you know, the efforts we did when I was in the fire department, and we weren't coordinated with our neighbors. We weren't coordinated with the public agencies. I'm talking about Marin Water District and Marin County Open Space District. And I see this as a huge step forward. Where are we going in the future? It sounds like you have a lot of ambitious ideas. I think, I heard you say public education looks like it's taken off strong, and I would agree.
That could be one of the biggest tools to incentivize the work. If we are looking to enter into the partnerships so that if you, Paul Smith, after you had your inspection and you did everything that we suggested you do through that inspection, we can give you a certificate that you can show your insurance provider, and they will guarantee not to cancel your insurance or non-renew it when your renewal comes up to date. So if we can partner with the insurance companies to say, hey, you do your work, you keep your insurance.
Well, Mark, the history of the insurance companies in the United States goes way back, as you know, to the colonial times. And the insurance companies were integral with fire departments and fire protection back in New York and Philadelphia back in the colonial times. And we have a couple of examples of what they used to call fire marks. And then we'll show those to you now.
Some insurers are realizing that maybe the best way to protect their investment is to provide a little bit of extra funding to the residents. And so we're looking to see if we could partner with the insurance companies to join in with our grant program so that after we do an evaluation of your property, you can apply for a grant from your insurance company and from the MWPA to get that work done.
Oh, wow. We saw the numbers in the Tubbs fires, you know, Coffee Park, Paradise, SCU lightning strike. We saw the numbers on what it costs the insurance companies. And it's not a wonder that some companies are saying, hey, we're out of California. We can't afford to do this year after year after year. So looking forward, Mark, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. And after we tackle the, all of our work within the built environment, it's just like painting the bridge though, right?
Right.
It's, like you said at the beginning of the show, the vegetation grows back. So we're just going to have to come right back around and get all that work done and continue to work with our land management agencies for the overall forest health.
Well, Mark, thanks for joining us today in Marin Fire History. We've talked in a slew of topics, all good, how we came to adopt different laws and ordinances, and then, of course, with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority coming together a couple of years ago with a coordinated effort. And I think you folks are on the right track, and best of luck.
I appreciate it, Paul. Great seeing you.
Good to see you too.